Hello, everyone. At least I hope some people are out there. Let me know if you can see and hear me. As ever, I may be having technical problems, like with my cord there. I see Quindy. I don't know if anyone else is out there. I missed seeing you all last week because I came home from ReaperCon sick. And then, Chris V, McGuyler87, hello. Sorry, I'm just switching out a wrong finger. I'm just switching out a Band-Aid before we start because I want to have a fresh Band-Aid if you're going to be staring at my hands. Hi, Shadowspawn the Assassin. I allowed myself to use knives yesterday. This is why I prefer to prep with files. Because I will stab myself. I don't slice, I stab most of the time. But, and then I missed the Monday after ReaperCon because all of the studio equipment had been at the hotel and they brought it back, but it takes a while to hook it all back up. But it's nice to be back, but I am still a little sick, so I've taken all the medicine I can think of to take, so hopefully I will not, cough to the point of being super irritating to listen to. And hopefully I will, be reasonably clear-headed and sensible for the duration of the stream. We'll see. I think I'll make it through, but just in case I have to tap out early, that is why I'm still recovering. I don't do too badly in fending off germs. As many cons as I've gone to, I don't get con crud that often, but if the germs get past the outer defenses, then it takes me kind of a while to turn back into a human being, and that's what I'm working on right now. So I'm, excuse me, I figured I'd play with the super washes again. If you go on the store right now, I asked Ron about this morning, they were selling them as a separate pack of 12, and that currently says contents 0. But my understanding is that they're doing a final inventory. They're going to put together the last of the sets they can put together, and then whatever remaining bottles there are will go up individually. So I would say to you that this is kind of the last chance for a while to get the super washes if you're interested. They're also in the Barrowgate box, which I think there were 10 of when I looked last. And I've got the page up on my iPad, so I can check halfway through the show. But that was what Ron said to me, is that they were doing an inventory final count kind of what they have for the paint bottles, making up whatever sets they can. And then those should go up later today, which, you know how it goes. That might not happen until tomorrow, but now you've got the in on the knowledge of knowing, refresh every few hours if you've been waiting for that. There are lots of other ReaperCon goodies that are up on the store. Let's look at one right now. This is one of the best ones. I see Bob and Julie are here. So I got a few of these. Because I might actually even paint some. But we'll see. I'm definitely going to poke bottles with them. Quindy wasn't sure if they'd put the prototypes up again. I don't know. I didn't ask him if they're making more of the Barrowgate boxes as well as the sets of the super washes. But I would say if you want one of those, now's a good time to make sure that happens. But a bunch of the other stuff that I will show you if you like, I don't believe the figures are going to be taken off the store. I mean, the things that come out in Bones USA seem to stick around, even if they're sort of special edition. And you even commemorates the date. So that does kind of suggest that this won't be available in the future, this guy. But I'm guessing the figures will continue to be available. So I can show some of those if people want. I was frantically, putting a little extra white on these guys right before the show. So we had a very rare moment here in Tennessee. This is the time of the year when the stars align and it's cool enough, dry enough, and not windy enough that I can use spray primer. Very exciting for me. This is Bones USA. I would not be using spray primer on regular bones. And Ron and I, when I was down at Reaper, we talked about, just painting a whole figure with each of the colors from the super washes And he had suggested the Mengu Timor that's in the Learn to Paint kit. And I said, well, what about the Orc? Because I think you get a lot of surface areas. You get flat areas, which is something people don't always like how these kind of paints work on flat areas. You get the rounded muscles, you get chainmail, you get fur. So it's like a nice variety of different surfaces to see how they will work. And then I didn't talk to Ron about this part, but when I was thinking about it later, one of the things I think is a little different with the Reaper super washes compared to other products that are kind of intended for the same thing, like contrast paints, instant colors, speed paints. Vallejo's jumping in. We're going to have Express soon with no E. Most of those, my understanding is they're designed to be used straight out of the bottle. I don't think that that's necessarily the intention with the Reaper products. You can if you want very dark colors, but then you can get a broader color range by adding medium or water, and you get different effects with adding medium or water, which we did talk about before. So that's what I mean by they're pretty dark out of the bottle. But then you can use, I recommend, if you want that property where they're falling into the crevices and bringing out the texture, like in this row, you want to use medium. Brush on sealer is Reaper's version of medium. I know that some people like to use these, I guess, in a similar way to acrylic inks, and shoot them through the airbrush to tint and tone things. So if you wanted more of a smooth application, I would say then thin them with water, because that's what's happening here on the bottom row. So this is out of the bottle, and a lot of people are going to say, well, that's way too dark compared to a contrast or whatever paint. And all of these, in fact, are out of the bottle. This is the colors in this initial set. I mean, okay, obviously yellow isn't too dark out of the bottle because yellow. But I think the point of that is there's only 12, so to make things flexible, we're going to have to mix colors together, and then we can get different effects by diluting things. I was working on a few more guys while I was at ReaperCon, guys and gals. So I had asked Ron to send me if there were any white bones left, because then I don't have to prime anything. So he found these ogres that were still the original white bones, and he sent me those because I didn't have time to prime things before ReaperCon. So when I was sitting at my desk, and then after, when the artists were hanging out at Reaper waiting for Ron to have a minute to talk to us, I was goofing around with the super washes on these two figures, and I feel like I learned some things. If you've ever done watercolor painting, there's a definite mind shift between painting watercolors and painting acrylics or oils, because in watercolor you leave the white. Like anything you want to be white, you just don't paint over it, and then anything you want to be a light color, you only paint very light colors over, and then you work down to your darkest colors. And it is definitely a mind shift in thinking compared to with acrylic paint. If this didn't turn out light enough, well, I can just paint over it. If you're doing this kind of, and I don't know if we have like a collective term for this style of painting, which is not contrast. Did not invent this, by the way. This is way older than contrast. But the best I can come up with is tint and wash. Like the idea is that you're applying color and contrast, shading at the same time. And the reason I say like contrast didn't invent this is I haven't been able to find it yet because our house is chaos. But hopefully one day I will find it. My husband had a box of miniatures. There's Victoriana Steampunk 1886. And this is like from the 80s. The 1980s. I'm not that old. And neither is my husband. And there was a pamphlet in there with it, and it suggested priming your figures white and then using thin down paints over them, essentially like I was talking about with watercolor, where you have some lighter areas and then you paint down darker in the shadows. And if you're a longtime Reaper person and you used to go on the Reaper forums, you remember someone, I think his name was Frogmeister. I can't remember his forum name exactly, but he used to paint that way a lot. James Wapple, if you follow him at all, both with acrylics and oil painting, he will often do, I think he calls it pre-shading, and he'll put a lot of color on, and then he'll use something like this and take it off the high areas so that the white is showing through more, the white of the primer is showing through more. That's a very similar idea too. Anyone, the whole idea of painting inks or washes or whatever over a zenithal primed miniature like this one, that is also not new. I took a class on that at Gen Con in 2008, 2009, something like that. Might have been earlier. That was probably more like 2006. So this concept is not new. I think what's new is companies trying to formulate paints in a way where you don't even have to do stuff like with the sponge. And the paints do some of the work. Acrylic paints are like the most complicated formulation of paint. Like oil paint is literally just oil plus pigment, and watercolor is just like gum arabic plus pigment, and then acrylics are this acrylic base that can be part vinyl, part acrylic polymers, and then they can add all these other things in like flow improver and drying retarder, and everybody's formula is a little bit different. And then trying to formulate something like these paints that are gonna dip into the crevices, that's like a whole other chemical adventure again, which I think is why everybody's are different and work a bit differently. But I think the principles of applying them over the white and different ways you can use them, I think those are pretty universal. So even if you're like, well, why would I get something that there's only 12 colors? I'm going to go get contrast where they have like 40 or whatever it is now. The stuff that I'm showing and the things we talk about, that should apply to that too. So I'm going to quickly paint one orc, and then while it dries we can go the other way. I don't know. So I had been working on this orc. I think I started this one with you guys. Yeah, because so some of this is the prototype colors and not the new colors. The darker brown is the new color. But I only had like 4 or 5 prototypes. So the first show of this, we had to make stuff up. These ones are all the prototypes. And there are things that, I think I should have stayed a little lighter and then worked in more shadows. It's like any other kind of painting. How much you get out of it and how much you put into it are related. Which doesn't necessarily mean spending like way more time. Hey, Curse 13. I'm showing some of the figures that I worked on at ReaperCon with the Reaper Super Washes. And I'll probably be goofing around with those some more and showing some of the figures that are available up on the store right now and other ReaperCon goodies if people want. But while I'm thinking of it, if you were at ReaperCon and you have questions about anything related to like the MSP Open or I don't know, classes in general or something, feel free to shoot those in the comments and I'll see what I can do to answer. Or I guess just general ReaperCon stuff. I'm now so busy at ReaperCon that I don't always get to do I don't get to do anywhere close to all the things, but it's like, I think I made it to the dealer hall for 10 minutes, which is often as long as I get there. I bought a book. That's all I did. Hugged a few friends. Honestly, even though I'm a judge and I spent hours and hours and hours in the contest room, I did not get to see all the miniatures, which I'm kind of annoyed about because I didn't see some of the cool things. But if you are in the same position, we can both go to reapercon.com, and there's a drop-down menu with a gallery for all of the entries that were in the show. And the past couple of years, people have been able to use their own photos, not just have access, because the way it used to work is you bring your figures and there was a photographer for the show, which there still is, Megu, and he does an awful lot of work. That's, talk about people who don't get to go see all the stuff at the convention. The people in the contest room are definitely in that position because they work a lot of long hours putting in all those amazing entries. This is another figure that I was painting with the super washes while I was hanging out at the show, waiting for people to come ask me questions at my desk. And I tried to paint him in a similar color scheme to the figure that's in the Learn to Paint kit that I painted like this, which is Level Up. So not the core skills, the other one. So yeah, it used to be that, and someone at a show like that they've got a nice photo setup, they've got a nice camera, but they can't take the time to change settings for, oh, this miniature is primarily painted in dark colors. It would look better if you adjusted these settings a little. And if something's primarily light colors, or, you know, changing out the backgrounds, they don't have time to do that. But some of us do. So if you have the time and the equipment, you can take a picture of your figure before the contest and add that as part of pre-registration for your entries. So the pictures from the last 2 years include some that, you know, people like me took their own pictures. So you can see a lot of figures there, and you can also kind of go back in the archives. It goes back to, it doesn't, I don't think it has all of the ReaperCon photos ever, but I think it goes back to like at least 2014 or something. And you can get an idea of how entries have changed over time. And you could pick out a friend that you know and follow their progress through the years. That'd be kind of fun too. And then also, if you go on the Reaper YouTube channel, it's not broken up. I think it's just like ReaperCon day 1, day 2, day 3, day 4. But if you watch day 3, I think it's like at the very end of the video is the award ceremony. And as people's names are called to come get their medals and certificates and special awards, when the technology is working, which I think it did most of this time, I think it worked better this year than it did last year, the miniature that is being awarded will show on the screen. So that's another way that you can enjoy the entries, even if you weren't there, or if, like me, you were there and you didn't get to see them all because you were doing other things. Because certainly people might spend a lot of time gaming, and you know how it is at con. Depending on what your interests are, you may see a whole lot of one thing, and like then somebody's talking about this other thing, and you're like, that was at that convention? I had no idea. So the nice thing about the all the streams being up on YouTube, and Quindy is telling us that there are timestamps so you can hop around to the different events in the videos, is that you can see some of the other activities or the other people that were at the convention. Crow's Nest that same day, earlier in the day, did interviews with several of the artists, and maybe other people. I haven't had a chance to watch it all yet, so I'm not sure everything. I was on there for a minute. You could even see my husband if you want. That same day, day 3, there was a board gaming stream that I think Tasha Rama was hosting, and my husband popped on that for a little while because he runs the board game library at ReaperCon. So I'm not seeing any ReaperCon questions yet, so I will go on to my project with these guys, and I think I will stick him down. So I had primed them. Like I said, it's a very magical time. One of the 3 days of the year when I can prime. I was wondering if they called my husband, you know, Mr. Rhonda Bender or something, but I don't think they teased him that way. Too bad. So my goal with these is, I've got like a passel of them. I didn't get to paint the extra white on them, so I primed them, and they look like, where's one of my just primed guys? So this is Bones USA, so it's gray, and I was concerned that it wasn't white enough, particularly some of the swords. When I was pulling them off my little plates, I'm like, I didn't put as much primer on there as I should have, you know, because it was 2 in the morning and the light probably wasn't great. So I'm like, what I'll do is just slap some slightly thinned down white paint on them, and I only did it to about here. So this also gives us kind of an opportunity to see if you don't put a whole bunch of primer on a gray surface like Bones USA, or a lot of the Bones Black or gray too. If not all of the Bones Black or gray. Are you saying you saw the board gaming thing with my husband, Curse? So tell me how he did. Did he have fun? Was he funny to watch? I haven't had a chance to watch it yet. So this way, and that's the other reason I did this, is I've noticed that brush on or aerosol, white primer isn't as white as some white paint, and black primer isn't as deep a black as most black paint. So if you want it, and we're getting the light colors by applying things over white, you might want to put an extra coat of your brighter white paint over something, even if you find it white. So that was the other reason I decided to kind of give them a little halo effect here. Julie says that Bob has a badge calling him Bob Guthrie. I don't remember which con it was. Trasharama, I bought the Dirty Downs effect washes. They are pretty legit. Oh, were those there? Dang it. So those were at ReaperCon. I didn't spend enough time in the dealer hall. My 10 minutes in the dealer hall was not enough. And I missed something that I have a tab up on my browser. I'm one of those people with like 4 million browser tabs open. To go buy some Dirty Down effect paints because I think they look super cool. And I could have done it at ReaperCon. Dang it. All right, what color shall I start with? I don't feel like yellow is going to be super interesting to watch on screen. We've seen magenta. Let's do blue. So this is the Tempest blue. I gotta get people to like text me the hookup on what the cool stuff over in the dealer hall is, because I never seem to make it over there anymore. Julie, so there was one, I think it was one of the ReaperCons at the first hotel. And I walked in and everybody had their little nameplates and stuff on the artist alley. And mine was just like, visitor. Like, okay, who did I offend? Why is Ron mad at me? Why does this not say who I am? And they fixed it. They got me a real one. But I just thought that was hilarious. I have a picture of myself holding the very vague nameplate, the non-nameplate. I probably even kept the non-nameplate somewhere. So I'm just going to do this straight out of the bottle. And then I'm going to do a second guy, and this is what I didn't talk to Ron about, where I thin it down, which is probably closer to the opacity that a lot of these products are being sold at out of the bottle. And then I'm going to figure out how to deal with the fact that when I paint fast, I get bubbles. So I'll paint less fast, because this is supposed to be a chill episode, actually. So if you didn't go to ReaperCon, what cool, fun things did you do for Labor Day weekend, if any? Because it's like, it's been a minute since I got to see you all, so I would love to know what you've been up to as well. And there you can see the kind of thing that why people don't love these on flat surfaces, but then on his hand it's starting to fall into the crevices between his fingers and creating shading with no work from me. Which is nice, because I'm tired and I don't want to work right now. And I'm especially tired of being sick. That's the part I hate the most about being sick. It's just when you're like brain dead and too tired to do anything. Like, there were days when I was like, ugh, I can't even watch TV. That just seems way too energetic. Too loud, and I have to concentrate. I spent like a week doing pretty much literally nothing, and I'm very much over it, but I'm too tired to do very much now. It is kind of annoying. It should also start to fall into the crevices of his beefy muscles. And we got that effect on the other one. I meant the one where I was painting him more in an orc-like fashion rather than super blue orc. He is very blue. Some of these bubbles just want to tax me. But again, I have this problem with regular paints. When I paint fast or paint highly textured things. So I didn't do a lot of prep on these guys. There was, most of them had a little, probably the end of a channel from the mold on the top of the sword, and then on his chin, and I think I got most of those. Mostly I was just trying to make them flat on the bottom so that they will stand up correctly. Because he has a pretty narrow base for a chunky guy. So far I've been in the brighter white areas, but now as I get down past the curve of his back, I'm going into some of the areas where I did not apply any white paint. Which, to be fair, did start out because I'm lazy, but then I thought, no, it'll be interesting to kind of have the comparison. And I'm also not going to paint the base at all, so that it's easy to see, you know, what kind of underlying surface there was that this was painted over. I'll say that this is using some paint because he's not a small character. I mean, he's not, you know, a giant, obviously, but which is the other nice part about them being highly pigmented and being able to add medium or water is that you're extending the paint color. Pre-thinned is convenient, but it does mean that you're paying for more medium rather than more pigment. But it's whatever gets the job done, I find, that I like to have. Trashorama, I catch people not at their desk at Artist Alley and I sub in for them, much like a seat filler at the Oscars. Last year I was Bobby Jackson. Oh, I bet you had some fun with that. You could have a lot of fun with that. There were a lot of new people this year. You could have very much confused some people. I was catching up on Reaper Live yesterday, and I love that picture of Bobby Jackson standing next to the person whose costume was one of his wizards, Darius the Blue, I believe. And just the goofy grin on Bobby's face is... I mean, I love that people dress up. Like some of the miniatures and everything. That Oswald the Overlayton from last year is just fantastic. But just how happy Bobby was to see that is also very enjoyable. Here's another big flat surface. But this actually, and I didn't even realize this until painting one of these with the super washes the other day. And I've painted a few of these figures, you know, because of the limited paint kit and everything. There are some nice scratches and stuff on this shield that the super washes can bring out. And I imagine regular washes too. But most of these guys that I've painted were, so many bubbles, were Bones, like original Bones Classic. And it's amazing how much more detail there are on these Bones USA versions. Which I noticed that there are a bunch of the Dungeon Dwellers and some other things have been re-released in Bones USA. So, I'm blanking out. Baron Blacktree was one of the anniversary figures. And, no, Dungeon Dwellers? Yeah, he was one of the Dungeon Dwellers. And that whole year that those figures were the figure of the month, there are paint guides for each of the figures, and Baron is one of the ones that I painted. And now everyone can get a nice crisp copy of him in Bones USA. What else have I missed here? Ghost Stork. Yeah, he's feeling blue. He's feeling very blue. Curse 13 has a hard enough time sorting my Guthrie models from my Rodolphe models without them getting the name tags mixed up, like the story that Julie was telling us. The Real Science 86 just joined the stream. What is happening here? Are we putting a blue wash on? Hi, The Real Science 86. This is a new product. It's a soft release for Reaper. It's called Super Washes. And Ron, the art director at Reaper, asked me if I could paint these orcs just entirely that color. It gives us a chance to see how the product behaves on different kinds of surfaces. So right now I'm going over this fur texture, which it should work well with. It's designed to kind of settle into recesses and more lightly tint upper areas. But then if you look at something like the sword, it's a little streaky on there. So I might want to thin it down or apply it with more care or use something different on flat surfaces. So I'm doing this one with the product straight out of the bottle, and then I'm going to thin down, because this is pretty dark. And if you're doing this sort of, I've been calling it tint and wash style. I don't know if the community has come up with a name that I have missed. But stuff like contrast paint, Army Paint or Speed Paint. The idea is that you can apply some color and a little bit of shading to a figure with one application of paint. If you do a little extra, which some of the painted figures I will show that are not a single color, I have done a little extra, you can get even more effects. But the purpose is to have something to get figures on the table a little more quickly. But I also know a lot of painters who like to paint more display or, to a commission level, stuff like that, who are using these as these kinds of products as tints and tones, the way that you might acrylic inks. Now I will brush paint that way, like I'll thin down paint for glazes and use it to shift colors in the recesses or add color complexity. A lot of people apparently like doing this with the airbrush. It can be a little stressful because you're doing this as a last stage, not a first stage. So it's not like a zenithal prime where if you mess up, oh well, you haven't lost a lot of work. These are people who are toning and tinting, nearly finished miniatures. And I just am not keen enough on dealing with the airbrush that I have adopted this very much. But that seems to be the other popular use of this kind of paint as an alternate kind of acrylic ink. So this is a product that people have been using to do that kind of thing with for a while. And I'm not sure if the appeal might be partly that it is not quite as runny as an acrylic ink. The colors do tend to be, fairly pigmented like an ink, but it might be easier to thin down. So he's going to take a minute to dry. It doesn't take like wildly longer to dry than regular Reaper paint, but I painted the tops of these guys white before the show, and I needed to start that like about an hour before the show to make sure that they were dry, because regular paint can take a minute. But now I'm going to get a second guy and dilute that with so my guess is that most matte mediums would act in a similar way, but if you were here earlier, I was talking about how acrylic paint is actually a more complex formulation than, oil paint or watercolor paint. And paints can behave differently. So all acrylic paint is, intermixable. It should work together, but, you might find like this paint seems to work a little better for wet blending, and this other paint, Reaper paint, is good for thin down applications. You can thin it down a lot more than some other paints, and it doesn't like start to separate or become very weak or whatever. So, and that's a difference in the acrylic binder part, which is essentially what medium is. Apologies for the noise and the jumping. See, those little balls aren't moving at all. So Reaper hasn't released a separate matte medium. This is off-label. Brush-on sealer is matte medium. I've talked to Rod about whether we should just make people's lives easier and make a bottle that says matte medium on it. This is a golden product that is a similar thing. And the fact that it's fluid, that means that it's going to match our kinds of paint better. Because I'll have thick gel toothpaste mediums too, and that's not going to help. Glazing medium is another one that is more likely to be our consistency. It says fluid again. Whether this is matte or not, I don't know. Clear brilliant implies, yeah, gloss finish. So I do intend to try those products, but I'm painting these for Ron, so I'm gonna do use Reaper products. Chris V, I would never have thought of mixing brush-on sealer with paint. Yeah, actually, so a lot of brush-on, no, that is pure white, brush-on sealers, or clear coats, they're essentially the clear part of paint. So they're not a magic bullet for sealing. People who've been here before know that. I've gone on about that before. Something called varnish is more likely to be intended as a, final coat. You may need to treat those differently. Like if you look at the art store varnishes from Golden or Liquitex, some of them will say like don't stir it even. It doesn't mean that there's no point in putting that coat on. It's just, I think there's stuff you can do before you even start painting that is going to improve how sturdy your paint job is, instead of relying on something that you put on last. So Quindy's going to be very helpful, and find a link on my website to how to paint a sturdy paint job or something like that. Quindy's good at finding this. It's on the main page. The name of the article is How to Paint a Miniature That Should Survive the Apocalypse or something like that. And there's like 8 different things that I suggest for making the paint job on your figures as sturdy as possible. And like number 1 is cleaning the figure off. So all of these figures were dipped in isopropyl alcohol before I primed them. Then I primed them. And in an ideal world, I would not have primed them at 2 o'clock last night in the morning. I would have primed them 2 days ago before starting to put paint on them. The primer I use, I think it's probably cured, but the same with paint. So let's say I finished painting this guy today, and our game is tonight. In an ideal world, I would paint this guy 2 days before the game so that the paint has time to cure. We think of acrylic paint as being very fast drying. It is very fast drying, touch drying. The full strength of the paint takes at least 24 hours to dry to the full paint film cure. So all the water evaporates and the acrylic molecules are clumping together to form the strongest paint film possible. And we don't think about it that way. It's the same with super glue, actually. So you think 5 minutes, my super glue's done. Super glue doesn't fully cure for 24 hours. So the same thing, if I had assembled this guy, I would probably not want to paint or handle him, if I could avoid it, for 24 hours. Obviously, people get away with doing this stuff all the time, but, if you want to do ideal practice, those are ideal practices, which is one reason I often use 2-part 5-minute epoxy glue, because that only takes 1 hour. So it's holding stuff within 5 minutes, but then with 1 hour, the glue is fully cured. Yes, Shadow Spawn on the Assassin is pointing out the same goes with primers if you let primers sit for a while. And I've heard, I don't know how scientific this is, but I've heard if you heat treat them, so like if you put your hairdryer on your primer, that'll help it dry sturdier too. But yes, so that's kind of what the article that Quinny just linked. And if you're on YouTube, you can try going to my website at birdwithbrush.com. It's up there somewhere. And just look on the first page, scroll down a little bit, and there should be something about how to make your paint job sturdy. And it's like wash the figure, prime it, let the primer cure, paint it, let the paint cure, paint it on a handle so that I could just be holding these guys like this, but I'd be rubbing off paint and primer. While I'm doing that, I'd be adding my finger oils to them. So I stick them down on these little things, not just because it's easier for me to paint, but it also is going to make the paint job sturdier in the end. I feel like there must be another couple, and then like the final one is use sealer. So I actually don't. I don't use sealer on my Bones figures. I don't use sealer actually on my fancy display figures. Don't tell Ron. He thinks I do. Maybe he's given up that notion. I don't know. It's been a few years. But he's always like, you seal your figures, right? Yeah, sure. But I do all that other stuff. So I don't seal, but I do all that other stuff. I'm looking for tweezers because I don't know if this happens when you guys prime, but I went out on my porch, which admittedly is where pollen and cats hang out. And when I prime these guys, I often find giant cat hairs on them, even if there wasn't wind. So I have my tweezers ready for that. I'm going to have to count for a minute, so you guys are going to have to like talk amongst yourselves because you all know how well I do at counting. 8 drops of that, and then I'm going to do 16 drops with the medium, so there's more counting. So. All right. And that should be equivalent to this consistency, I think. I think that was 1 to 1 and that was 1 to 2. Yes, okay, so for anyone who doesn't know what the superwashes are, these are the initial 12 colors straight out of the bottle. So the blue orc is this blue right here. And the texture does make a difference. So yeah, it looks great here in the wood where there's the little crevices, but it's going to look a little different on this chainmail, on the fur. So that's why I wanted to use a figure like the orc that had a lot of different surfaces. These are examples of thinning it down with that medium versus water. So that's straight out of the bottle. This bottom row is water. So that's 1 to 1, 1 to 2. So 1 drop of product to 2 drops of water, and 1 drop of product to 4 drops of water. And then this is the same, but with that medium instead, with the brush-on sealer instead. So this is 1 drop to 1 drop. This is 1 drop to 2 drops, which is what I've just mixed up. So 1 drop of the paint to 2 drops of medium. And then this is 1 to 4. And you can see that when you mix it with the medium, it keeps the settle in the crevices property more, and it becomes a much more even application of color if you use water. So if you're someone who wants to spray it through an airbrush or use it for tinting and toning, you may prefer that to get a smoother kind of filter, essentially. And then this is, Reaper makes a product called Wash Medium that kind of is medium and water. I mean, it's possible there's a little more flow improver in there. I don't know. There's flow improver in all Reaper paints. And it kind of splits the difference between mixing with water and medium. And then this is the same thing, just a different color because I wanted to try a slightly darker color and a slightly lighter color when we tested that. And that's on a previous episode of this show. So if you go to Reaper's YouTube channel, Wendy has uploaded all of these streams. So I did 8 drops of paint and 16 drops of medium for this pool, which I hope will be enough. So I had to refill multiple times on the straight up blue, but I may have to do more counting. We'll see. But the 2 episodes that were most recently uploaded, which I think are 56 and 55, if I remember correctly, and I may not, were also me messing around with this product. So that's when I did those tests with the medium versus water. The swatches were a video on my YouTube channel, which is just Bird with a Brush. I did a short video about these, and then I also did one of the streams, the consistency test, which let me just get to. As with regular washes, you kind of want to, or glazes, you want to paint to a natural stopping point on the miniature, because if it starts to dry and I come back up against it, there may be a line that shows. But if I stop here where it's up against his wrist armor, like that's a natural stop, there would be a line there anyway. So it's not going to matter that I pause here briefly. I think I got a little. I do think that, for the intended purpose, slapping it on is good with this, but I got a little slappy. So some people were saying that it looked very like a thick consistency, more of a gel on the video on my channel. So I did this viscosity test right before I left for ReaperCon, and I'm hoping to make another video for my channel as well, but not being able to talk for the past couple of weeks messed that up. But now that my throat's getting a little better, I think my apologies to those who like things to be straight. I thought I had set that up. So this is a drop of Reaper Metallic paint. This is a regular Reaper paint. This is Reaper Superwash, something green, emerald green. This is a regular Reaper Wash, black, I think. So that's that one. This is a Viejo model paint, and this is a Viejo wash. And then I tilted this up like this, and then people wash on screen, and then tilted it back because these wash ones started to drip pretty quickly. So someone at ReaperCon was, hi Kodiak 716, was pointing out that this is actually testing both viscosity and surface tension, and I'm not quite scientific enough to distinguish all of those things. But I do think that surface tension is part of what makes these products work, because you want it to settle in crevices, but like a regular wash, you don't want it. A regular wash is more likely to drift into parts you don't want. So if I'm painting these figures like this, I only want the hair color to go on the hair. So I don't want it to be too easily dispersing and drifting down into the crevices on the shirt and stuff. So I think there is kind of an ideal balance for these kinds of products between the surface tension and the viscosity and whatever else. But that is just my theory. I'm not implying that I'm a paint chemist. I'm very much not. Then I said that whole thing about how it wouldn't matter because I was at a stopping point, but then I find the little parts where I miss because that is the part of this kind of painting that I'm still getting used to, is not missing bits. I do not know why I'm so bad at that. Probably because I am a careless painter. I just am used to fixing my mistakes instead of trying to get things right in the first place. Something you may not know about, display painting, contest painting, whatever you want to call that kind of thing. We are not necessarily painting neatly and precisely the whole time. We're just fixing it when we screwed it, which is often. I'm checking for bubbles. And I'm not getting as many bubbles now. I don't know if it's because I've slowed down a little or if the medium helps avoid the bubbles. He's got a little piece of flash there that I did not notice when I was fixing these figures up last night. I think most of these orcs are actually from the very initial Bones USA molds and production runs. Because right after they, the Learn to Paint kit figures were among the first ones that they did, because they apparently go through a lot of those kits. And they were having to sometimes substitute figures depending on, if they ran out of stuff, and you guys know how long it takes to get the things from China sometimes. So they wanted to be able to make them in-house and not have to do that. Because I was going to have to write up alternate instructions for some of the most commonly subbed figures, and now I don't have to because of Bones USA. But they sent me a big box of these soon after they started producing them, and there are a few little rough spots that I think they've worked out in subsequent experiments with the Bones USA process that I don't think are happening much in the figures that I get in blisters and stuff anymore. And possibly not in these. Oh, I see he's had a little bit of rub off actually. Talking about how your primer isn't cured yet. Because I laid these guys all down on paper plates and then flipped them over. But that is weird because I started them on the back so that their fronts would have the least likelihood of primer damage. But I'm going to have to fix the little spikes on his armor plates on his belly. Because otherwise we won't be painting over white. I think there's a few comments I will be looking in just a sec. I just want to get through the shield. Since that is one of those flat places, it will definitely get little lines and stuff if it starts to dry in parts before I finish the whole thing. And that's one reason why I recommend having brush-on primer, even if you are fortunate to live somewhere else where the stars don't have to align for you to use spray primer the way I have to. Wait. This is rare, perfect time of year for me to spray prime stuff. I should figure out a bunch of other things I need to spray prime. Work on that the next few days. All right, so I'm going to get some, this is the Superwash Tempest Blue, 8 drops of this to 16 drops of brush-on sealer, because I want to maintain the property of it going into the crevices. If I use water, it would be a flatter look. I see Valander has joined us also. Oh, and Raiders. Valander came with Raiders. He was playing Champions Online. More like a small super team. I think I played that game like a million years ago. My husband. So I don't know how I messed up those spikes. But that's probably like how we were talking earlier, because that primer isn't really cured. But I have brush-on primer for just this type of reason. I'm just gonna put it in an old blister pack so I don't waste one of my little palette squares, circles, whatever they are. Yes, trash 2-to-1, which is on my test doc. I thought that was kind of most similar to the transparency, opacity level that I was seeing in some of the similar products by other companies. So what I would also do is, let's say I wasn't painting this guy completely blue and I painted the skin or whatever and I messed up. I would go back over that with white before I got to this breastplate. If I was painting this kind of tint and wash thing, like this guy here. I'm not sure if I already cleaned him up. No, like I would need to clean up his dagger. So this is one that I was working on with these super washes at ReaperCon, and I was trying to paint him with a pretty similar color palette to what's in the Learn to Paint kit. And the vest was actually way easier. So the vest, I don't think I had a gray, so it's like you had to mix like 4 drops of this with 1 drop of that, and then some water as well. So the vest in the Learn to Paint kit is one of the more annoying things to paint on that guy, I think. I will work on the back while the front dries. You see that gravity is definitely having its way with this product. And like any other wash, if there were a particular way I wanted it to fall, like if I was like, if I really wanted getting down into the divots of this chainmail, I might paint one half like this and hold him sideways, or set him down sideways while it dries, to try to concentrate the deeper, the collection of the wash into the crevices or divots. Or there's probably a name for that. I bet Julie knows, because she makes awesome chainmail. I should have brought that over, your awesome chainmail, to show people. but I'll have to try to remember to do that next week. My little buddy is over on my computer desk instead of my paint desk, so that I don't accidentally get paint on him. Because that is the thing I would do. I actually have this like weird desk island. I should try to figure out how to get my iPhone and give you guys a tour sometime. The center of my room are 4 desks pulled together. So this desk is for painting. I've got a desk with my camera set up and also just like some storage stuff beside it. And across from that is what's supposed to be an art desk, but I don't seem to do traditional art much anymore. And then next to that is my computer desk, which is where I sit if you watch Reaper airing. That's when I'm at my computer desk. Well, and then also when I'm goofing off online is when I'm at my computer desk. So a lot. But yeah, I do recommend keeping brush on primer on hand, even if you normally prime through an airbrush or with an aerosol spray can. When you do get rub off on figures, which I find is like if I was painting this guy, I would have painted the skin first and then some other stuff, and I would have left that sword to the end, because chances of me brushing that sword with my fingers and rubbing some of the primer off, or paint and primer if I had painted it first, are pretty high, and I would prefer not to have to repaint it like 4 times. So I would leave it till the end, and then check and make sure that it hadn't had any primer rub off, and if it had, I would use that brush on primer. And if I were feeling especially diligent, I might even get a little bit of rubbing alcohol on, just get artificial paintbrush, synthetic paintbrush I should say, a little bit of rubbing alcohol, just rub that over the part, the bare metal or plastic, to make sure that there weren't like finger oils and stuff on that section, and then apply the brush on primer. Because I know a lot of people over the years who've said, oh, you don't have to wash miniatures, the paint will stick fine. But it just seems like such a simple step, whether you're just using a toothbrush and dish soap, or I like to dip them in the isopropyl alcohol now. It's not an agonizing prep thing to do. It seems well worth it to me to avoid the possibility that things are going to flake up because there was a little bit of oil underneath. And especially with resin miniatures, the mold release that they use on resin miniatures is pretty intense and hard to get rid of sometimes, so you definitely want to. So that's the difference between the full strength and the thinned down for diluted version, because it's not really thinner. That's one of the things about using medium, is the paint's going to feel different than if you're used to mixing a wash with just straight water, and you might find that you like that. You might find it a bit easier to control when we talk about like surface tension versus viscosity and stuff. You might find it a little easier to control than if it's just straight mixed with water, but you get a different effect. And what I would probably do for some things is like start like around here or even lighter, to make sure that I've got those upper areas, I've got that white shining through to create the highlights, and then come back with something less diluted like this and just be applying it to the shadows if I wanted to take the time to do that. But this is also another way of just changing the color. You can change the color a different way, and I'll just use a test thing. What we got? Yeah, this guy's just ended up being test work. That's his mission in life now. So I can take this same out of the bottom one. So I think that was like 2 drops, and I just should have stopped squeezing. And I won't put the white right in the paint. So I've got pure white, and it's useful to have pure black too. The black in this set is, so this Knox black, it is a blue black, and it is definitely a blue black. So when you mix it with some colors, it may not react the way you expect. So to me, it's worth having, you know, a white and a black around. If I just want to shift color duller, like maybe this blue is just, it's a lot of blue. For his pants, I started with that color, but I didn't want that much, you know, I didn't want it to be ba-bam. So I added a little black, I think. I might have added a little black and white, because you'll get a slightly different effect with gray again. I don't want to gum up my nice paintbrush, a goopy one. So it's going to be a little less opaque. I mean, a little less transparent. Where's Test Guy? I don't know if I added enough white that this is now noticeably less transparent, but we'll find out. Do a little bit on this fur here. Ah, loves the palette. He always loves to focus on the palette instead of the dude. And then I will add a little bit of that brush on sealer and do it on another part of the fur. So because you've got the white shining through, that does make stuff lighter, but I find that it is a slightly different effect to add white than to just have the white showing through. And then if you want to dull things down, adding a little bit of gray or black are easy ways to do that. And then you can get into like color theory. Mixing stuff where, you know, if I want to dull down this green, well, I did dull down this green, I think. Now I can't remember. That might be straight up green. I might add a little bit of that chestnut red. Chestnut brown. I mean, it's chestnut brown, but, you know, it's a reddish brown. And that will, you know, you mix complementary colors is a way to mix brown or gray. So if you just mix a little bit of a color complement into something, it just tones it down. Let me, what else do I have in here? Got a little beat up, but there's our buddy. There's our 4 scale. But with zenithal prime. So some people seem to like this stuff over zenithal prime. These kinds of products, and some people don't. It seems like a very workable idea to me. But I also like applying, you know, I don't mind applying shadows over, which is what I did, like say on his breastplate. I started with that chestnut brown thinned down, and then I think I ended up using probably the black to paint in some additional shadows. But if speed is your goal, zenithal prime might get you somewhere kind of similar. I'm going to take the thin down stuff that we have, but I do want it to be a little less intense of a color. So I'm going to mix a little white and a little black. Ooh, I get to use the new pokey tool. Very excited. Excellent poking. And what does that go with? Crap. Oh, okay. Sorry. It's my brush on sealer. I have a bad habit of like putting the wrong cap on my white paint. So I got a little panicky for a minute there. I think I need a little more white. It's hard to dry out. So they're fairly intense colors, but they're not hard to tame. And I think this will be it's still going to be a richer color than what I did on his pants. Trash is thinking these could be used to paint the ghost characters from the Ghost Dwarf from the Bones 5 Dwarf King's Crypt set. Yeah, it's a pretty good ghostly blue. I wonder if we mix the green and the blue, if we make it even ghostier. I like the little green in my ghosts, I think. All right, so this is the paint that it started out 2 drops of medium to 1 drop of superwash, and then it's got just a little bit of regular opacity black and white. And I believe that is pure black and pure white. Not that other ones won't work, but it's just my understanding from Anne that those are the most highly pigmented of the blacks and the whites. Now I have to try to be careful not to go around the symbol, or I have to accept that I will get paint on the symbol and then I just paint it white later and do something else. I think one test guy I had with this, I tried painting the symbol metallic and then painting the stuff over it, so it might work for a way to quick paint gems that way as well. This was airbrush applied, since I believe he's original Bones. So this is I don't know how you say this. This is this primer with black and then white, and then I think I used a little bit of white acrylic ink that's like super white from the main light area, main light direction. Just a few of these guys that I painted up to test these with, and then I did this when I got the prototypes, but I was like, it was a pain to prime these guys. I think I would like to wait until I have the real paints before I use it on any of the Zenithal ones. Edge and the inside, since there's some of that black in there still, that should stay nice and dark. I just want to add a little bit of the blue to it. And I feel like his shield should also be blue. He's going to be a blue dude. And then the downside of this figure is that literally everything else is metallics, so I guess I have to go paint metallics, and then you'll notice I have all these figures with the white parts, and that's what's happening. It's like, well, I did all the colored stuff. And now I need to have an episode of painting metallics, I guess. Our Dread Skull. Hi, when I tried painting a Bones black figure recently, even after washing in soapy water, rinsing, and letting air dry, the paint just pooled up. I wiped it off and then tried priming, which I thought it didn't need, but it too pooled. Any idea what happened, please? Were you thinning the paint at all? So the Bones black and a lot of other vinyl plastics, which is this type of plastic. It's a hydrophobic plastic. It doesn't like water. So the first layer of whatever you put on it, you don't want to use water. So I think I have one of these where we have it on the body. But we will, yep, there it is. We will do a fresh one. for it. So this is, if you thin with water, it does that. That one maybe had less water. Some of them are worse than others. So there are absolutely some of these where, I was working with these super washes. I can't remember if it was the lady or the male ogre. There was a little bit of pulling. The other thing is you just slop the paint on. Once you get a coat on it, of something, primer, paint, whatever, I've applied these washes directly to the surface. If you do want to make something more transparent instead of water, you can do the same thing we've been talking about here, which is using, this is essentially Reaper's version of matte medium. So if you have another product that is matte medium, now this might not work as well because, an extender in this sense, they mean it makes your paint go further. But if you get a product that has a lot of flow improver in it or a lot of drying retarder, those are not acrylic binders. They're like water. They are going to make it react like water. So we'll do a test. I have a regular blue. What's this? Ultramarine blue. All right, I'm not going to use that my little pool though. I'll use this. So this is Reaper's Ultramarine blue. Reaper paint out of the bottle is pretty much what I consider basic consistency. So the only reason you need to thin paint down, unless you're doing something like a glaze or layering, where you need to make the paint more transparent for the effect to work. But in terms of, I am putting paint on the surface of the miniature, why do I need to thin it down? The only thing you need to worry about is if you're going to fill in surface detail. If the consistency of the paint is so thick, then it's going to fill in surface detail. So one of these paints, these are art store paints. They're a little thicker, and they're actually the closest art store equivalent to our kind of paint. So that's not even a tube paint, because I can't remember what I did with my tube paint that I usually keep at my desk. But here's my test on whether you need to add any water to something you're applying to the surface. You draw the brush through. You see how that little line is taking a while to fill in. This is a self-leveling paint. It may eventually fill in, but if it's thick enough that it's doing that, it's thick enough that it may leave some texture on my miniature, or more crucially, fill in some texture on my miniature. So that was the art store paint that I would add a little water to before using. And this is a Reaper paint where the wake, you think of the bristles like a boat, the wake fills in pretty immediately. So I don't need to thin that down. It's not going to do anything bad to my figure. And once I get that coat on there, if I treat that as my coat, and I can treat this as a coat, we're not going to be able to see it. I'm going to tint it very slightly because we will literally not be able to see it. It is a clear product. So I'll just get a little bit of that ultramarine blue and mix it in. You can use this as a primer. I've tested this. If you go to the Reaper forums, there is a forum post with the first coat is the difference. I think it's pinned. And I tested a variety of different products and things. So it's not beating up. So that's the brush on sealer, which is essentially matte medium, the clear part of paint. So you can totally apply a wash over bones. This is the super washes that we've been using today. This is super wash with 2 drops. So 1 drop of super wash, 2 drops of that matte medium, and then a little bit of black and white. It's doing it a little bit. Some of these are worse than others. Absolutely. And my solution is just paint more. And then even if there's still a little, if I come back over it after, I can cover it up. Let's try, this is the art store paint. And it is a little, so it's not beating up much, but it is just a little smidge thicker than what I would want to apply to an area with a lot of detail. Like if there's not a lot of detail, it's probably not a danger. So I just added some water to it, and it is a little more hydrophobic now. But if I swipe again, then it's sticking. Now, one thing I will note, this is the equivalent of washed. I dip my figures in isopropyl alcohol, which I think works even better than scrubbing them with soap and water. But there are absolutely ones of these that are worse than others of these. This is just, and I'm not sure I did wash this guy. He may or may not react the same way. And he's not, for whatever reason. This one's a little less hydrophobic. Try it with the superwash. And yeah, it's not, where the superwash beat it up a little bit at first. It didn't. Well, the thinned out art paint is actually struggling a little. That is interesting. Because I would have thought that that was more than, I mean, it's still thicker than what I would use. But now let me take the Ultramarine and I'll add a little water. So I can't tell you why every now and then there's one that's worse than others. There's slight variations in the plastic mix, I think. And that is my best guess for why. So that one I added water to. Hey, Jellyware. Yeah, I couldn't come on after ReaperCon because they didn't have the equipment set up, and then I got sick. So that's the same color. Oh no, I never did put Ultramarine on. Huh. It will be the same color. I just did the wake test. So this is that same paint straight out of the bottle, and it's not doing it. And if I can just squeeze a line in here. But once you get something down, so even when I have one of those ones where it is a little more hydrophobic than another one, I'll just get a coat of paint on the area as much as possible. And then once that's dry, I'll just come in and go over those parts where it didn't fully cover or the paint pulled back a little. And I don't prime my bones. The only reason I primed these guys, I do think actually Bones USA that we probably should be priming, and these are Bones USA. But I primed them because the super washes have to go over white. So that's why I have a bunch of these old white bones, is because I didn't have time to prime things before ReaperCon. And I asked Ron if he could send me some guys that I could work on directly with the super washes. And I have been. And like one of these, I did notice just a little bit of that hydrophobic thing, probably because I was thinning down with this stuff so that I could apply more shadow later. That's not what's happening here. He's got a little patch on his hat that I did not completely avoid painting on. And he's getting close to all that's left is metallics too. He's got some more skulls, I guess, I need to paint. But she's pretty... I need to figure out what I want to do with the... I feel like this should be some kind of cool stone or crystal or something. And that's another one I was painting with those. And this he is down to the metallics. Like there's this dagger and the sword and the trim on his wristbands and the treasure chest. Yes, no water for the first thing. Once you've got that, you can do washes and glazes and thin way down. Once something is on the surface, you're cool to thin. It's just getting something on the surface in between your thinned stuff, your watery stuff, and the PVC that does not love water. So let's check on our orgs that I think are still drying, but they're pretty close. So that's the straight out of the bottle. And you can see that it's done a pretty good job bringing out the textures of the fur and the chainmail. I think I'd say the same thing for like his muscles. I probably should, if I'd been painting this figure for real, I would have tried to look like, oh, is it covering up a bit too much in some places on his face? And I could pull some of that off with a damp brush. But it doesn't look as great on a flat surface. It's not too bad on the shield, actually. For some reason, the full strength didn't do as much of what this one did, which is what you would want, where it's going to sink down more where gravity and light would want to cooperate. But in general, I would probably start more at this kind of dilution and then add shadows, rather than considering them as straight out of the pot. Depending on your use. Obviously, if you're painting something black, then you would go with the black, because you don't want a lot of light stuff showing through. We'll check the, nope, where's test? This is the guy that I added. So I added a little white to the straight out of the bottle Tempest Blue Superwash. And then I added a little medium to that as well. So I think that works a little better if you do want to add some white and or black. Because those colors are more opaque, it doesn't hurt to add a little smidge of this to help retain the transparency, the higher level of transparency. Pendrake asks, why do I think the Bones USA needs priming? And Kirst said, I always put a spray base on because that's just what I've always done. And I'm not sure if Kirst is talking about Bones USA specifically or all miniatures. I definitely do not recommend spray priming the bendy bones that we were looking at earlier, these guys, whether they're Bones Black or this original white. I know that there are some people who manage to do it successfully. There doesn't seem to be enough of a pattern in a product or any other element that I feel comfortable recommending that to people. So if you want to make sure you don't get sticky PVC figures, do not use spray primer products on them. You can use airbrush spray primer. Although honestly, I had a couple bones get sticky with this Stynel res, which really surprised me. You can spray Reaper primer through an airbrush as well, or just spray on a coat of paint. I mean, paint adheres really well to them. They don't need primer. Like in my tests, which included throwing some of these together in a plastic box that I wrapped a towel around and stuck in my dryer to simulate, extra wear and tear. I think I threw in some bases and other things with corners in as well and see what got scratched up the most. And the ones with primer got as or more scratched up as the ones that were just paint. But why do I say that I think we should be priming the Bones USA? Which honestly I have not up until now. I've painted several for Ron and other purposes with no primer, and I noticed one of them I was getting a little bit of rub off. And then it occurred to me they're not a polyvinyl plastic. As someone is mentioning in the comments, Valender's, it's a thermoplastic resin. It's a completely different kind of material, really. So it's the PVC is the stuff that I don't know why, but paint and PVC form a really strong bond together, where I don't think that's as true of this thermoplastic resin stuff. Now, is it pretty sturdy? Sure. I painted, at least a half dozen or more Bones USA figures before I noticed a problem. So I don't think it's like wildly problematic, but it is a different material. It's probably more similar to like a 3D print type of plastic, which I would also prime. And I do when Reaper sends me prints to sometimes when we get masters now, they're still metal. Sometimes they're a 3D print copy that they've made for the artist to paint. And I think they're doing 3D prints. There was one of the figures from ReaperCon, and I don't know if I have them. I feel like I must have them around here somewhere because I brought some of these over to show you guys. Was a print. It was like they had some kind of they have some kind of consumer level printing where they make a whole bunch. So this guy, Stub the Accountant, they're all prints. Everybody's is a print, which is like fascinating to me. That's why it's got the little stringy looking things on, because you get that with prints. Reaper's actually pretty nice, and they mostly clean up the ones I get, and then I have high cleaning standards, so then I fix some additional things when I get them. So, and I'll pop them out. Pop them out so we can take a closer look. And we can look at some of the other figures too. Jellyware primes with medium gray, depending on what they're doing. Yeah, I actually, for general purposes, I like gray primer a lot. You can paint dark stuff over it without too much difficulty. You paint light stuff over it without too much difficulty. It's easy to see, like on camera here, when I do classes and I'm like passing stuff around for people to see. I think it's easier to see than if something's like bright white or really dark. But they're, obviously you can get different effects, like these paints that are somewhat transparent are going to work best over white. They're not going to do anything over gray. Just catching up on seeing if anything else. I don't know where you live, Kirst. You might have the right kind of climate for sprays to be less tricky. My theory is that climate has a lot to do with it, and that if it's a little more humid or a little too warm or too cold or something, that might be when people are getting more problems with sprays on Bones Classic, Bones Black. But there's so little pattern to it that my advice is not to spray. I mean, or to do what you do, experiment, see if you can figure out something that works for you. But just don't assume that it's going to work just because Kirst said that brand, which I'm not even going to repeat for the YouTube video, that brand works for him. If you go over to the Reaper forums, the thread I mentioned with the first coat is the difference. There are like 13 or 17 pages of replies from when I first posted that thing, and the majority of them are, I use X primer, I use X spray primer, it works fine. And then 3 messages down, you say, well, I tried X spray primer and my miniatures were sticky forever. So no one's found a brand that consistently works. So it's not about brand, it's some other factor. And that is why I continue. I know this has become like a near religious debate, and I will not engage on Facebook or other places with the spray prime, don't spray prime bones. I'm firmly in the don't spray camp, and I feel like I did the scientific tests to support my theory. So I'm okay with it. Valander is saying that it's because of PVC-based miniatures have their hardness leached out by some of the accelerants in spray paint. And you can't rely on a brand because the factories that make and label spray paints will use whatever accelerants they can get the cheapest. I mean, I do think it's something like that, since, the primer part of primer is the same in spray versus brush on. So, So Kodiak said someone explained it having to do with unlucky chemical composition, humidity, and other factors. So yeah, I think there's just no way to guarantee that it'll be fine. I am very puzzled as to why Sinorez did it to me on 2 figures. Okay, that was unexpected. But unless I'm zenithal priming, and I can do that with black and white paint, so. Shadowspawn the Assassin, brush on primer never fails. Yes. And for those of us who live in places where you can only spray 3 days out of the year, it is there for us. Gray Mouser, you can paint over the sticking. You don't have to worry about it unless you're an exceptional painter, which would probably airbrush anyway. I do think if it's just tacky, you can paint over it. I have heard of people saying that it's like wet. Like it never dries. Like it's almost liquid. And that I don't think that you can. Painting over that is not going to fix it. But if it's just a little tacky, and I did the Sinorez guy that I had that was a little tacky was one of the first figures I used to test these new super washes, and it worked fine, and it is no longer tacky. So that's Stub the Accountant. And if you remember the figures from last year, and these are all still available, of course, but there's like Nub, the Dwarf Butcher, and then there's like two halfling brothers whose names I can't remember, Chop and Grub. And in the Brinewind Pirate City, they all work together in like the piratey medieval equivalent of a fast food kitchen. And so it's all the shorter races of people. I think there's a mongrelman, something or other. There's a dwarf baker too. I can't remember his name. But this was one of the last of those characters to come out, I think. So he technically isn't a dungeon themed guy for this year's ReaperCon, but he's still pretty cool anyway. And I'm fascinated by the idea that we are all essentially getting, first off the mold miniatures if they're prints. Zambies, I don't prime my bones. I'm like, why? The paint adheres fine, and then I can just start with whatever color I want them to be. Nomad Zeke, Anne doesn't prime her bones, so I just prime mine because I got an airbrush and a bunch of Stanores. And kind of primes, she will often give it a coat of brown liner, which is the same as, another way, if you're someone who primes like, okay, my army is like this green, so you've got some kind of Stanores or some other companies make primers in different colors as a quick starting point. So if you're painting orcs and they're all going to have green skin, you use green primer, you've gotten a leg up on your painting. I would just use paint the same way. So I would airbrush whatever the color was that I would want to use as a primer. I just use that color. I'd say I was making them all this blue. I'd just airbrush the blue or brush prime the blue instead of getting a primer that color if I was using it on the bendy bones, regular bones, original bones, classic. I don't know. But yes, and if you'd like to have a zenithal, I would just use paint for that. I just use paint through an airbrush. Also, because then it's easier to clean my airbrush. Because primer is harder to shoot and harder to clean out of the airbrush. It's much better with the Vex than it was with my original airbrush, which I used primer in once and said never again, because of how long it took to clean out. Do you guys want to see more of the figures that you can get on Reaper right now? So these are things that came out from the con, but you can go buy them. Oh, and then also, if you remember when I was talking about how they had like palettes in the Barrow Gate box, and I thought they were the same as my exemplar palette, and they are. So you can get a Reaper Red palette on either in the Barrow Gate box, which there were 10 of when I last looked, or you can just buy the palettes themselves. And I think Ron said on Reaper Live that they might continue to sell these on Reaper. So you can get these Reaper Red ones, and it comes with the cool thing for travel. I was very happy to have this when I was at ReaperCon, so I could do washes and whatnot. And this will work as brush holder. And then you can put brushes here. I would use like this blue tack stuff to hold them down if you didn't have the brush covers or something. And then this is, we're talking about how we all have different climates. Depending on your climate, you may not want to have a completely sealed environment. I will tend to make a terrarium if I do that, and water will fall down like rain from the top and thin all my paints out too much. So you can like open that hole. With the old school palettes, we just used to kind of leave a corner open. Honestly, I never figured out the magic exact way to do that so that the paints would stay at the right consistency. But maybe you are luckier or smarter than I am, and you will manage that. So you can get that on the Reaper website right now. If you just go to reapermini.com, there should be like a banner across the top that says ReaperCon 2022 thingamies. So you can click that on. Wendy says, I've never seen Anne put brown liner on as a primer on her bones. I have no idea what you're talking about, Valander. She always says she doesn't prime them and washes them with soap and water. I know there are a lot of people who do that, who use brown liner. So I don't know. When he says buglets discovered the brown liner on bone, saying a lot of people use it. Maybe someone referenced that. And it could, is it possible that it was one of the streams that Reaper hosts, but it wasn't like one of the Reaper painters? To my knowledge, Michael Proctor doesn't do that. Michael Proctor would try to avoid painting bones as much as possible. He likes to paint masters if he can. So he doesn't even like painting Bones USA, which I'm like, whatever, they're fine. Grey Monster is expecting the Mega Bundle next week, which I cannot remember which is in what thing, but I will show some of the figures, and the figures you can get separately. And if you want these super washes, so it might say 0 right now, I will check in just a minute, but Ron told me this morning that they're going through the remaining stock and figuring out what they have, making up sets, and then anything, if there's bottles left over, because I'm sure it just works out that way that they make a paint and you might get X number of bottles out of one mix and Y number of bottles out of the other, so they're going to have a few like kind of extra bottles, and those will go up for individual sale. And he was expecting that to happen today, but it's Reaper, so I don't know if we want to make assumptions. This is the ReaperCon Sophie that you can get. She's in Bones USA. Now this one is a print, the one that I painted, because I got it before they had finished making them. But I've got a blister one that I'll show you in a minute, and it looks beautiful too. So, and it is very nice to work with the wings in these lighter materials. I will say that. You all know how good I am at gluing. So these glued on fine, and I was very excited and happy about that. Where sometimes with the metal ones, I get to ReaperCon, and a wing has fallen off, and I make Michael fix it because I'm just like glue cursed. So this is the Sophie. I had fun painting her. I think I took it away to make space, but I had some stuff I was going to show you about. Well, maybe we'll do that next time. And then I like how things look on black, but I do think it changes the colors, so I often try to take something on like my more neutral background as well. Okay, that's just me saving Dragon Comics. Let's not look at that. What else have we got? This is Daryl Brumby, Human Fighter. And he's available now. If you took my OSL class, he'd be a good one to practice with. Radishard says, please teach us the cobblestone base technique. What do you mean? Like sculpting it or painting it? So it comes with a base that has that kind of thing on it. You can see that Daryl does too. I was going to paint one of these things. Which one was I going to paint? Pop it out. All right, I'll just pop out another Sophie so we can see the base. Sculpting. So I did sculpt it a little bit because this is the size of base that she comes on. And I wanted to expand that a little because she also ended up being my ReaperCon entry. And honestly, I don't think Ron's getting that one, which is one reason I ripped this open, because maybe I should take pity in Ron and paint another one, but it will not be painted that exact way because I am too old to do that again. So what I did was stick that down to a circle base. Just put her wings over here before I lose them. And used putty, which I might be able to show this sometime, but I think it's too late today. I don't have many bases handy for one thing. And you can do this with fairly simple tools. So I will try to make a mental note to do that. Maybe I could do it next episode even. I have meant to do dealing with integral bases stream where, because sometimes you want to take them off, or extending them is another option. And the other thing that I did with this, and that would work if you wanted a bigger base but you didn't want to have to deal with sculpting, is you can take your ground materials. Some people use like gravel that you apply with glue. I was using pumice paste, which you can get from the art store, as well as companies like Viejo make sort of dirt texture pastes, and you just kind of put that around it and make it look like it's in, I was trying to make it look like it was a bit ruined and it was fading off into a section that I don't know if there's another angle where these vines and roots and stuff were coming up from this other area in the dungeon. I also took ReaperCon opportunity to tell Bobby Jackson that these kinds of textures are a pain in the butt to have to sculpt to match, and that bigger squares would be easier for us to do the base extension thing with. Because first I yelled at Ron. He's like, Bobby did that. I didn't tell him to do that. And I'm like, all right, then I'll make a mental note to yell at Bobby. So I like a bigger dungeon square because it is easier to sculpt to match. But sculpting bases is like an excellent way, or, sculpting to match bases like that is an excellent way to start getting your feet wet in sculpting. Like, even I can do it, and I'm very inept at that kind of thing. Yes, exactly. Bobby Jackson. Ah! I was like, damn you, Bobby Jackson. And it's like, he still talks about that time I told him that I didn't love the hair on that. When they switched over from physical sculpting to doing the 3D sculpting, and honestly, even still a little bit, hair was one of the areas where I really felt like I could see a difference, or that it didn't look as natural or as realistic or cool. I don't know. It just seemed too noodly. I don't know. And the sculptors actually, they do ask the painters for feedback. That's one of the reasons we get together, or that we stay a few days later after ReaperCon. Julie and Bob are really good about asking us, like, well, is this kind of thing difficult to paint or easier to paint, or like what makes something, more accessible to paint. And so when they first started, now this hair, is much nicer than the first few years of the 3D hair. And my understanding is that it's very tough. Fur and hair is very tough to do in the 3D thing, and way easier to do, with the traditional methods. And then there are other things that it's the opposite. Like getting really sharp edges is probably easier on the computer than it is using green stuff. Like, you might have to use different materials or other things like that. So there are, challenges and advantages to both. Or how, I guess they just get to copy and mirror something, and poor Bob and Julie just have to go make the other side look the same as the first side. I don't know if you're better, Bob and Julie, but I'm better because they get to zoom in, right? And I don't get to zoom in painting this guy. I mean, this is kind of like zooming in, but it taps out at a certain point. And I'm like, just remember that the people painting these don't get to zoom in. So this is this year's ReaperCon Mouseling, who would also be a great figure to practice OSL with. And I like that he's kind of a Roman vibe to his outfit. So he's up on the web store right now. You don't have to get him exclusively through one of the bundles or boxes or whatever. Who else we got? Lando Griswold, the Human Wizard. I was thinking about maybe painting one or two of these on stream. I know that Anne is doing... Where is she? She's super cool. I was kind of like, dang you, Anne, you chose the cool one. But it is not the only cool one. I have lots of options. Anne has been painting this figure. I believe Anne paints a different figure every day. I do not know what day of the week she's painting this one. This is Turvin from the Ghostwalkers faction, which was the faction I signed up for, not just because of the figure. Curse13 says, Bob and Julie don't even think about it. They just make things. They have probably forgotten more than most of us have ever learned about many things. But I'm pretty sure there's some stuff that they have to do some work on. Yes, she is doing a cat person as well, but I think she does. So she streams 5 days a week. I think it's at 11:30 Reaper time, so Central. And she does a different figure each day until that figure is done. So Big Apple says she's continuing Turvin tomorrow, so that would be she's working on Turvin on Tuesdays. So she'll be doing Turvin every Tuesday until she finishes her, and then she'll start another figure. Another company is trying to resuscitate their 20-plus-year-old wargame series with a 4th edition, but all the minis will be 3D printed. They are not selling STLs, they are printing the minis and selling the prints. I don't know if there's... Oh, I am wrong. It's a rotation. There is not a stable day of the week that she returns to each figure. You just have to keep your eye on the notifications, and if you can't watch live, you can find them over on a very long playlist. Because I was going through the playlist looking to see which of these figures Anne was working on. I was like scrolling. 5 days in a week, 6-figure rotation. She keeps it interesting for you guys. Julie would miss the tactile aspect of the analog sculpting. And I kind of get that, because I know that there's various ways of doing digital painting now. I mean, in theory, Bobby could probably send me the file for this, and there's going to be some program where I could just put the color on this, and that might be kind of fun, but it definitely wouldn't be the same. It wouldn't be everything that I enjoy about miniature painting. It would skip some of the things I don't enjoy about miniature painting, like stabbing myself. It would skip that. But I don't know. So I'm thinking about painting this guy, because Ron would be excited to have all of these figures, he said. I'm like, is there anything particular you want me to paint? And he was very vague and wrong about that. Oh, that's that guy again. You already saw him. Oh, she's pretty cool too. I was thinking about her as another one that maybe I could paint on stream. So if any of this sounds exciting to you guys, Carrie Michael Cosby, Procreate will let us paint a 3D import now. Oh, so I will sometimes take a picture. Often I'll try to grab it off the Reaper site, because they usually have their examples in white, and then you can kind of do paint overs to test your colors. Valen was red. I enjoy green sculpting, but I don't have the experience of the most remaining Putty sculptors, and I can see better when the figure is 12-inch tall on my screen. So just sculpt 12-inch tall figures. We don't have to sculpt stuff that's gaming scale. That's the nice thing. When you make it yourself, you can make it whatever size you want. That's what everybody's doing with the 3D prints, right? They're like, well, I want it to be this big, and someone else says, I want it to be this big. And that's a whole... I'm still yelling at my paper printer, so I don't think I'm getting into that anytime soon. I don't think there's any more figures in there, but I have some more over here. Oh, this is the brush holder, which I believe you can get separately as well. This, I think, is the coolest brush holder yet. I mean, I've liked them all, but this one seems sturdy, and also it's fun that it's like a castle. Looked at Turban. Look at that lady. Oh, here's a very spiky dude by Virian Thornforged, which I believe is another one of the factions. I want to say that's another one of the factions, and Jean did this one. And he's got some neat texture on his under kilt. I don't know. One of these days, I will go learn the names of medieval things, but it will probably not be anytime soon. Okay, I'm not going to show you things that aren't on the website. Yeah, because I think those are in the VIP thing, so even if you got the... What's it? They aren't there. This is Karabi Briggs of the Otter's Mark faction that Jason sculpted. And he has an enormous sword, so that had to be in 2 parts. And then this is not related to Reaper Home, but something that everybody needs to go buy a bunch of. Shroomies! And I definitely got a bunch. I got a bunch of shroomies. Okay, that's not a shroomie, that's a Muslin. But he could hang with shroomie. So these guys are now available in a 4-pack. My understanding is that they are selected randomly, so you may not get one of each pose. And there aren't 4 poses, there are 3 poses. So these 2 are very slightly different. You know, his foot is more up here. He's just starting to take a step there, and then he's taking a bigger step there. And then there is the other one. Is that guy. So there are 3 poses. You get 4 shroomies, but you can't guarantee which shroomies you're going to get. I'm not saying there was a box in the back room that I stuck my hand in and grabbed a bunch of shroomies, but I'm also not saying that happened. Put those away. Because, I mean, really, doesn't every base need a shroomie? I think they might. So that's the mouse thing out of the package. If you hear weird scratching, it's one of our cats trying to get into the room where my husband is. I think he's trying to conduct job interviews, so he doesn't want people to see our very disruptive cats yet. You got to hire them before you introduce them to the disruptive cats. Valander the Red. Don't use that as a metric. My brother has like 8 3D printers and he keeps running smoothly, but he still yells at his paper printer. Oh my gosh, 8 3D printers. Julie didn't get any shroomies. Oh, we got to get some shroomies to Julie. They need to be at random scales. That actually would not be terrible if there were multiple sizes of shroomies. I think we just need like an all shroomy box set in different sizes, different poses. Ask Bobby about we played a really fun role-playing game once with him that had all these little mushroom people. I mean, I'm not saying it wasn't also tragic. Not everything went well for the little mushroom people, but he drew the cute little mushroom people and it was fun. Hello, Karu US9. Jellyware is here. Nomad Zeke. Paper printers are like cats. Moody, they only work when they want to and ignore you when you yell at them. Well, they also yell at you because, like, now my printer does this thing where I get this pop-up constantly about buying more toner. It's like, we have ink. Don't panic. We have backup inks. You don't need to be telling us about this all the time. We're ready to go. It's all cool. But it'll just randomly pop up like 4 windows where it's telling me about the ink, and then I have to sit through it and like pop up one and pop up another. It's like when you go to those pages that just make things pop up, only now it's my printer doing it to me. Like, dang you. Dragon Shroomy, I like the way you think. Wow. Shroomlings, Shroomies, and Greater Shroomings. I think you're right. I think we need the all Shroomy box and basing set. I think it needs to happen. Well, we're getting close to time. I think I'm just gonna... Well, see, I don't even know if he needs extra shading. The first guy, I think the shield needs extra shading. So I'm gonna get the Nox Black. And just so I don't get too many... You mean it gets angry about being hungry even though I just fed it? Yes. Yes, it does. Much like my real cats. They're like, well, we liked that food yesterday. We don't like that food today. Why are you trying to make us crazy? I love my cats, but I'm pretty sure they are trying to make us crazy. And I'm not sure why this is their goal in life. This may be too dark still, but that's okay. And you get a minute to work with this stuff, so I can thin the brush off and kind of thin that line out a little. Just to add a little extra depth. And I don't really think his outfit needs it, but I could if I wanted. Go in, and that's the way I was painting a lot of the ones that I showed you earlier, where I was adding a little extra shading or something. So more and more, I think that I do need to treat this like watercolor and start a little lighter than I have been, and then just come in with some darkness, extra darkness here and there as necessary. And that is not too painful, I don't think. You don't have to do it, but it's not too painful. At least in my philosophy. So no, these aren't like contrast paints or speed paints in the sense that there's 40 colors and they work out of the bottle. You know, then some are going to be a lot lighter and some are going to be a lot darker. These are fairly intensely pigmented. You make the lighter versions by adding the medium. And then it's more like that. But it's not out of the bottle. You're going to have to mix some colors. You have to mix some values, essentially. So that is straight out of the bottle. And that is 2 drops of medium to 1 drop of superwash. And if you have comments about these, I think somebody said they wished that one of them was phthalo green. Let Reaper know. They are looking for some feedback from us, I think, before they continue developing this product line any further or put it out in full retail. This is essentially a soft release, is my understanding. and they want to know what we think, if these fit your needs or not. I mean, I find that I like how they're working, but you might not. You might be like, well, there's no point if I can't just paint straight out of the bottle and I have to do extra work and thin stuff down. That does not help me paint faster. And that is a perfectly valid piece of feedback that Reaper needs to know. Because my point of view is definitely not the only thing they need to know. Ah, there is a big giant white spot that I missed. I'm gonna hide that a little bit. Actually, that's not the right color anymore, so I will not hide that. But this is my goal, is to end up with 24 of these orcs. So 12 in the out of the bottle strength, and then 12 in the thin down strength, to get an idea. This is kind of, with these products, you need to at least do something like on these docks. You need 3D swatches, essentially. So we've talked about swatches before, and regular swatches work fine for traditional paints, but since part of the function of these is to do 3D things, you have to swatch them on 3D things to really see how they work. So I didn't see any comments. I will have to scroll back through and make sure, but I didn't see any comments about anyone being extra excited that I would paint a particular figure or anything like that. So maybe I'll do that next week. I don't know that I will be recovered enough to start putting together something for the dealing with integral bases. It's a bit more of a thing, but maybe I could just touch a few points on it and kind of over time get to various places. We could try fixing Sophie's base so that I can start getting her ready to paint Ron another one. He actually was, normally if I say something like I'm going to keep this, he gets upset if it's something like ReaperCon Sophie, because they like to have, you know, all the holiday miniatures and the ReaperCon figures and the special editions. The painted versions of those they like to keep in the gallery, which I totally understand. But after I painted her, I was like, oh, this was a lot of work, and I like how she came out, and I don't keep stuff very often. I was like, I kind of want to keep her, and he didn't actually object. So I think Ron must have been very distracted that he didn't object to that. Nomad Zeke, it seems like seeing if people are excited about a particular figure works best as a poll. Otherwise, we have the attention span of squirrel. Well, and then there's the part where a lot of people who are lurking don't want to say stuff in chat as well. So maybe next week I'll do a poll on the two that I think would probably be, I think it's more fun to do something that's not super detailed on stream so that it doesn't take forever. I know that y'all have, and if you want to watch somebody paint a figure from start to finish, and you don't necessarily want to watch me do that a lot, but I think it is nice to do now and then. Chris Green, funny that I'm also painting orcs. I've got a nice green skin and lava orange mix going. Interesting. WSRA Inc. What do you use and recommend for workbench lighting when you paint? I have, let's see if we can switch the view and see the lamp. Don't know if it will turn out enough. So I have ignored this lamp. I like this kind of bar lamp, and it folds up, so this part folds down. This particular one is one that actually a lot of the Reaper painters and Reaper itself got a bunch of them for us to do class stuff in, and it was made by Tautronics. The last time I looked, I couldn't find this model, and I think that's probably just that it's become old enough that there's now an updated version, which I think instead, like this has a USB port, and a lot of them now seem to have the touch charging thing built into the base so that anything that you can just touch to a charger, you can rest on the base. But basically it's an LED lamp, and it has a variety of settings. I always use it on the brightest setting, but if you would also be using your lamp to study or read or something, it's nice that it has alternate settings. Maybe Quindy can find I feel like I talked about it in that article. So before ReaperCon, I was talking about things that you might want to bring with you, and one of them was a lamp. I definitely talked about portable lamps, but I feel like I also talked about these lamps. So it's like travel with hobby stuff or something. It's 3 or 4 blog posts back. And there's also an episode of this show that is archived on the Reaper Miniatures YouTube channel where I talked about some things as well. I had a daylight version of the lamp that's a similar thing where it folds. Daylight being a brand, so that's the bulbs. They're supposed to be like complete light spectrum, and then Ott is the other company that makes those. And honestly, I used Ott and daylight lamps for a lot of years, and I don't think it made a significant difference in my life. Some people like to have two. If you use a standard desk lamp, you have two, kind of one from each side, so that you're eliminating shadows as much as possible. I've seen people building LED strips where it goes over your workspace in an arch. I don't think I'd like that. I think it'd be light from too many areas, but depending on what you're looking for and what you enjoy in the light. I like having this kind of light, and I actually paint like it's here. It's like right above my eyes when I'm painting. So I have the long strip works for me. For a few years I used more of a desk style lamp, and I didn't like it. I went back to this style. And then, so I'm like this when I'm painting. Well, and with the old age visual aid. So I like having the light right over the miniature. But different people like different things. So this other light that's back here, I do have this on. I put it here for streaming. So I wouldn't have painted with that on my own initiative, but I liked it enough that I leave it here. So it's mainly here for streaming to add extra illumination for the camera, but I like it well enough that I use it when I paint now as well, but I don't think it's necessary. Oh, so Chris is saying the bulbs on their Ott lights burned out fast, but Nomad Zeke had a similar experience to me where had Ott lights for years and hadn't replaced the bulbs. So yeah, the bulbs have not been a problem in any of the daylight or Ott lamps that I used. The original Ott lamp I used, that was it was a different form factor. It had different ways of twisting it had the long bar, but it had different ways of twisting it, and I used it to take pictures as well as to paint, and I ended up breaking parts that were not the light. So I still have one over on my photo area because it can just rest on top of my photo cube. And I think we had another one that we have in our board game area. So I've never had a problem with the light part of the lights. It's other than that one that was like a desk lamp, wasn't bright enough. It's been the lamp part that's broken down on me. But these LED ones are like way cheaper. They're easy to get on Amazon. It was, Tautronics, but I would look for LED desk lamp and just look for something that's kind of like that. It's got a long bar and it folds down, and it should have a few different settings and allow you to charge stuff. So they're made in China, and Tautronics may not be the biggest one that does it anymore. And the ones I saw now are very similar, but I think they're updated versions. So I know this specific brand and model, and that's what a lot of us got, but I'm pretty sure the other ones you see, and I don't think they're going to cost more than $40 last time I looked on Amazon. So it's not, and that's like the high end. You probably can find one for less than that. Well, I might have missed a few. Yeah, I don't like the price of the Ott lights in the daylight. Like, I honestly have not noticed enough of a difference. And if you think about it, your miniatures aren't going to be viewed in full spectrum light very often. So I'm not sure I get too caught. Like, some people will say, like, all your light sources should be exactly the same. It's probably more important for photography. Even there, I don't do it, honestly. I do like to have a very bright ceiling light. I have 3 bulbs in this. I got the brightest bulbs that I could. And I took the lampshade off, so the room, there should be like a little lampshade on top of it, and I took it off. My husband comes in here and he calls it the surgery. But I did get the lights that you can electronically dim and brighten. So if I'm doing something where it's too bright for that activity, I can still dim them. For like before bed, I like to dim them and stuff so that they're not always like, because it's bright in here, no lie, it really is. Between that and these lamps, I mean, I'm a bit older, and if you haven't been to an eye doctor lately, WSR AI Inc., make sure you're getting your eyes checked regularly. There is a certain age where you can start to develop cataracts, and I think it happens sooner if you are someone like me who has bad distance vision. Myopic. If you're myopic, I think you develop cataracts at a younger age. Although, as my eye doctor says, if you live long enough, you will get cataracts. So everybody gets them. It's just some people put it off a lot longer than others. But I now have baby cataracts. She said it's like 1 out of 10. So it's not surgery time yet. But I know that Havicus just mentioned having diabetic retinopathy, and my husband has retinopathy of prematurity, which is when you're born premature and then the oxygen tent makes it worse. They treat it a little better now because they know this, but we're not young. And he was very premature for our era of people. So he had a lot of retinal scarring, and he needed cataract surgery. Like he got it like 10 years ago. And he needed it before then. Not sure why the people he was getting eye exams from didn't mention it. And he noticed such a difference in terms of light and color. So once they get to a certain point, they absolutely affect how well you perceive. They make everything darker, and colors less saturated too. Karu got some of the daylight lamps, but that's because I suffer from SAD. Oh, for that, yeah, no, those are you need like 10,000 watt things staring you in the face. I got one of those for the winter as well, but I don't think I would be able to paint with it. Maybe if I could kind of hang it from above, it would work for painting. Copperhand. I have to get injections in my eyeballs for retinopathy. Fun, but it helps. Wow. Like, they must numb you or something so you don't move, or they have some kind of thing to get, like, because that would be the scary part of eye injections, I think, is that what if I, like, blink or jerk away or something. Karu has the prescription that's too strong for LASIK. Yeah, I think I'm on the edge, and I saw them do the surgery on TV, and there was this whole eye flap thing, and I'm like, I'm very uncomfortable with that as a concept. Like, what if you rub your eyes by accident, and then you rub off the eye flap? And so I never did the laser thing. I just stuck with glasses. I used to wear contacts, but now I have astigmatism, and they can't correct that as precisely with contacts. Plus, it's not comfortable. It's the same thing they'll have. Like, I mean, now I have bifocals too, so it would be the same thing. They weight them so that they'll stay in the correct orientation, but you can feel it when you blink your eyes because it's thicker on the bottom. It feels weird. I did not like it. Some people like it, and I did not like it. It's like thinking about the cataract thing too. Some people get their eyes done so that this one's for seeing close up and this one's set to see far away, and supposedly your brain makes that work. And I'm like, I am not really sure that my brain is going to sign up for that. And like, what if it didn't? Like, then I guess you just have to pay more money and they flip it back the other way. So I'm like, I'm just going to pick a distance and wear glasses to do things that are not that distance. LASIK does the flappy thing. There's an alternate kind called Smile, which kind of goes from the side. Interesting. Vision corrected and astigmatism fixed. Well, that is one thing that I'm looking forward to with cataract surgery at some point, is they should hopefully be able to fix the astigmatism when they're in there doing things, but which I believe costs extra, but still, it'd be worth it. It'd be worth it, I think. Numbing drops and a little shot of lidocaine, and they hold your eyes open with a wire thingy, but you still have to hold very still. Yeah, I bet you're properly motivated to hold very still. I can imagine. I'd probably do all right at that because my mom used to cut my hair and she would yell at me a lot, and I'm now told that I hold very still when I get my hair cut. Well, you don't want to have your bangs all crazy. You definitely don't want to have your eyes all crazy. But yeah, I was... my husband was very impressed at the difference when he got the cataract. Well, on his eye that works, the other eye. It's like... his other eye really is at how many fingers am I holding up level of vision. So that did not change. They really only did it for their benefit so that they could see into the back of his eyes to check on his retina and the veins and stuff, I think. You can see the doctor's hand with the needle approaching your eye and you do not move. Wow. Did they like chill you out with a little Valium or something too? Because that seems like one of those things that they would maybe want you feeling pretty chill about. But then I guess if you're too chill, you're like, I'll just move around. So that might be the downside of that. Well, I'm glad you all came and hung out with me today and shared interesting eye stories. Apparently we've all suffered many eye events. I'm sure there's some young people in the chat going, oh, I see perfectly. Everything's great. Enjoy your eyes while you can see perfectly. But I will figure out something new next week. We'll do something fun. Maybe I think I will try to remember to show how I would sculpt the, additional squares on the base and then show some of those pastes and stuff. I think I've shown them before, but probably not for a while. And they're very handy for basing. Because just covering stuff up is easier than having to sculpt to match things. So we'll definitely look at the just cover it up method as well. Thank you, Julie. I hope I feel better soon too, because I'm tired of being brain dead and not doing anything. And I'm sure everyone else is that knows me as well. Is tired of hearing me complain it. Copperhand took my OSL class. Excellent. I'm glad you enjoyed it. If you have any feedback for things I might do better, please let me know. I did mix it up a little this year because I figured out a few new things myself, and also the challenge of hands-on classes is sometimes you have to get hands-on before you know exactly what you're doing. But I'm going to let Quindy find us a raid now. I'm sure there is someone on Twitch doing something that we miniature enthusiasts would find cool. Thanks, Scary Michael. Yeah, I'm one of those people, if I do all right trying not to get sick, but if I get sick, then I'm just like this useful pile of whining. But we're almost past that, I think. Yay. Now my husband's sick too, but he's been sick a little while too. But we'll get over it. It'll be fine. We got to spend lots of time with the cats. All right. I'm going to stop now so that Queenie will find us a raid. And I will see you guys next week. Have fun. Oh, say hi to Mike Disney for me. You're going to Art of Mike Disney. Bye, everybody.